Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Emily Clark, filling in for Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics, and we begin this morning with Jake Hunsaker, a Republican candidate in Utah's 4th Congressional District. Jake, thanks so much for joining us today. For those who might not know you, let's give a little background on who you are.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Emily. Really appreciate the invite. And I'm from Ogden, Utah. I'm from a family of 11 children, a farming community where I grew up picking corn and milking cows. And I've spent most of my life here in Utah. I live in Riverton right now. And I'm part of this, stream of the Republican Party that feels very kind of lost in the current dynamic of things. We don't like the extremism that we're seeing from our representation. We don't like the partisanship that keeps us from progressing as a country and as a state, and we just want better leadership. And so this year I decided to put my name in the mix for the challenge to our current incumbent, Burgess Owens, in District 4, who I think is part of some of the biggest issues that I see in the party. I think we have real opportunity to drive progress that's going to be impactful for Utahns and for constituents in District 4, and I'm happy to be in the race. Okay,
so let's talk about your interest. You touched there a bit about why you wanted to do this, but having the desire to run, having the desire to make change is one thing, but actually doing it is another. So talk to us a bit about why you decided to get into this and why you're up for the challenge.
Well, listen, I think, the current representative, Burgess Owens, he's been in office less than a year. He's, a new incumbent. And in that short amount of time, I believe he has shown some very problematic behaviors. He's shown that he's not rooted in, Utah's community and in its needs. He's shown an inclination to progress, problematic narratives, extreme politics, conspiracy theories and lies that are ultimately threatening our democracy and keeping us from progressing. And so there came a moment this year where I thought, I have to kind of put my money where my mouth is as a concerned citizen and try and make a difference for Utah, for the future. There are things that we're not solving for that I think we really need to focus on, things like clean air here in Utah, affordable housing and access to, affordable health care and, immigration reform. All of these things are getting ignored because of the hot button issues that I think take up most of Mr. Owens' time, which is unfortunate. And so I decided to jump in. I'm a political outsider. I have private sector experience that I think lends itself to what needs to happen in Washington. And ultimately, I'm learning as I go here a little bit because I'm, like I said, a political outsider, but just in the first couple of weeks since I declared my candidacy, we raised almost $100,000. 65% of those donations came from within Utah, which is very remarkable considering less than 10% of Owens' money year to date has come from within Utah. This is a different kind of politics. It's grassroots involvement, it's local, it's rooted in things that matter to Utahns. We need it desperately.
Okay, so you talk about your grassroots effort, definitely a different approach, and you are challenging the incumbent. We talked a lot about Mr. Owens. It's a big challenge to go against someone who is already there. So talk to us why you believe that you have a chance here.
I think the dynamic here in the party in Utah has shown, even in other races, that Utahns want better. They just do. We expect much more from our representation than we're getting. And the state level politics that we see are actually very functional. Conservatism and government in Utah is highly functional and is really something that the rest of the country looks to in terms of an example of what should be happening. We don't see that here in District 4 representation, and there is an appetite. We've seen it in the fundraising that other candidates are doing in other races, the fundraising that I've been able to do in this race. Utahns are ready for change. We're ready for functional government. We're ready to work together to progress, to get progress on issues that matter. And I think there's going to be a very grassroots groundswell reaction to this race.
Okay, let's get your opinion on some big issues happening right now in Washington and beyond. First, let's talk about the infrastructure bill, how you see that running out right now, and how you feel about it.
The infrastructure bill and specifically the series of bills that we have seen this year that are trillions of dollars. Every price tag comes with $1 trillion or more, dollars attached to it. That is very problematic to me as a conservative. And we see the Biden administration spending recklessly. We see Pelosi in the House proposing bills that are ultimately threatening our economy and making it harder for families here in Utah to succeed, for small businesses to succeed. Infrastructure is something that actually all of us agree we need to invest in. But the way that Democrats are approaching it in Washington packs these infrastructure bills with other types of spending that are not productive. You know, when I think about spending, it's one of the things that makes me conservative, this idea that we cannot spend more than we bring in. You know, and we don't want to raise taxes. We have enough money floating towards the federal government every year to be able to fund the things that matter. But we're kind of racking up what I would term as the equivalent of consumer credit card debt every year, instead of thoughtful, proactive investment in things like infrastructure that are ultimately going to help us grow our economy. Absolutely, I think we need infrastructure spending. The way that Democrats are proposing to do that here in Washington is problematic and ultimately threatens the economy and lives and jobs and the families here in Utah.
Okay, finally here, let's get your opinion on pandemic mandates. Of course, a lot of talk about the COVID-19 vaccine, people for and against it. People saying, I'm for vaccination, but I don't want to be made to do so. So what is your opinion when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines and these different pandemic mandates?
Emily, the headline for me right now is that I am unequivocally pro-vaccine. And as a Republican, I cannot believe that that is, going to make me stand out. But I also have to say I am simultaneously, unequivocally against the federal overreach and the mandates that we see the Biden administration pushing for. And to me, that shows, just an extension of the problematic behavior that Washington time and time again displays. Once we give Washington more power, they keep it and ask for more. And that's not within the confines of the constitutional framework that matters to me as a conservative. I have to acknowledge as well that in some cases, we've pandered to the extremes of our party, and we have determined that vaccines are something that we're not going to take a stand on. I am unequivocally pro-vaccine. It is a godsend, when we think of the ways in which we can most effectively fight this pandemic and get back to normal. And we have to make those decisions at the local level, at the state level, in ways that are best and closest to the families and the communities and the counties that where this rubber meets the road.
Okay, Jake Hunsaker joining us here today. Finally, before we do say farewell, let our viewers at home know where they can find more information about you as you continue on this path to election.
Well, we've got a long runway. We're 9 months out from the primary next year. We're going to start signature gathering in January. We'll, of course, make a strong showing at caucus and convention and see you on the primary ballot next June. In the meantime, we're looking for volunteers and for donors here in Utah at jake4congress.com.
Okay, Jake Hunsaker, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Emily.